In 2006, a graduate student at the University of Colorado, a graduate student studying linguistics, got into some legal trouble, some very serious legal trouble. His name was Homicidal al-Turki. And at his house, where he lived with his wife and his children in Aurora, Colorado, while he was being a grad student at the University of Colorado, he had a housekeeper, a young woman from Indonesia. And in this criminal case, he was accused of keeping her basically as a slave in that home for more than 4 years. He was also accused of sexually assaulting her. Well, in 2006, despite his claims that he was innocent, despite his claims that the charges against him were motivated by bias because he is a Muslim and because he is from Saudi Arabia, the grad student, Mr. al-Turki, was convicted on state charges. He was convicted of theft, extortion, and unlawful sexual contact by use of force. He's now serving what amounts to an unusually flexible sentence. His sentence is 8 years to life, a sentence that he started serving at this Colorado prison in 2006. His home country of Saudi Arabia has repeatedly advocated for his interests. Saudi Arabia put up $400,000 for his bail during the trial. This YouTube video from 2010, which asks President Obama to pardon Mr. al-Turki, it has been viewed more than 1 million times on YouTube. The U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia during the Bush administration even asked the attorney general from the state of Colorado to travel to Saudi Arabia to discuss the case with the Saudi royal family, including the king, King Abdullah. The Colorado attorney general's deputy explained to reporters at the time, quote, the U.S. ambassador over there and the State Department felt there was enough of a concern to send over a representative of Colorado to explain to them our judicial system. Colorado's then Attorney General John Suthers made that trip to Saudi Arabia in 2006. It was paid for by the federal government, and he went there to explain that grad student's conviction and his sentence in Colorado. The Bush administration thought the complaints about the case from the Saudis and the royal family were alarming enough to ask that Attorney General to go over there and do that. Well, about a year ago, Homicidal al-Turki made a formal request to please go home to Saudi Arabia. He asked the Colorado Department of Corrections if they would please allow him to be deported so he could serve the remainder of his sentence in his home country. It was a request that the Saudi Arabian government supported, but Colorado said no. Specifically, the head of the Colorado prison system, Tom Clements, said no. He received and reviewed that request from Mr. al-Turki that he should move home to Saudi Arabia. He received that request. And then on March 11th of last year, Tom Clements wrote him a letter explaining that the transfer request was denied. That happened on March 11th. That was a Monday. The following weekend, on March 17th, there was a mysterious murder in Colorado. This was NBC coverage from local Channel 9 at the time.
He was delivering pizza when police believe he was murdered. They say 27-year-old Nathan Leone from Commerce City was shot. There are multiple crime scenes in this case. Leone's car was found near East 50th Avenue and 4th Street in Denver. His body turned up miles away in Golden off South Rooney Road.
Leone's family members say someone had called from a payphone at the Sapp Brothers gas station near 270 and 49th Avenue. Told Domino's to deliver a pizza to 50th and Forest, a deserted corner in an industrial part of Denver. Police later found his body 18 miles away in Golden. Family members tell 9 News he was shot in the chest.
If people saw anything suspicious yesterday at all, period, end of it, in that area, in any of those areas, you need to call the police immediately.
Family says Leone worked 2 jobs, worked hard, long hours, and leaves behind a wife and 3 daughters.
He was absolutely amazing, and I can't express
He
how
was an amazing
and caring and giving and wonderful, and what a good father and a husband he was to my sister. So please help us find who did this to my brother-in-law so we can have justice, please.
Nathan Leone was married. He's a father of 3. He worked 2 jobs. He worked days as a library assistant for IBM in Boulder, and he worked nights for Domino's, delivering pizzas to make extra money for his family. And as heartbreaking as that murder was, that young dad, right? The details of his murder, though, were just inexplicable at the time. Why kill him? Lure him out to the middle of nowhere, the moving of his body. Ultimately, what emerged is that what was likely to have been the crucial explanatory detail for why he was killed was something that was taken from him once he was killed, something that turned up 4 days later, 2 states away, but not before someone else was murdered as well. That young father, Nathan Leone, was killed on a Sunday, March 17th. 2 days after that, Tuesday, March 19th at 8:47 p.m. local time. A woman in the town of Monument, Colorado called 911. The woman was distraught. She told the 911 dispatcher that someone had rang the doorbell at her home. Her husband answered the door, and whoever was standing at the door, having just rung the doorbell, shot her husband in the chest. Her husband died on the scene. He died in his wife's arms.
Is a female party statement. Her husband has been shot in the chest at this address. Not conscious, not breathing. Somebody rang the doorbell. The husband answered and was shot. Unknown if the suspect is still on scene.
Suspect was not still on the scene. A dark, boxy-shaped two-door sedan had reportedly been seen running on the street around the time of the shooting, but with nobody in it. By the time authorities showed up in response to the shooting, the car was gone. The man who opened his door and was shot that night in Monument, Colorado, was Tom Clements, who was the head of the Colorado Department of Corrections. Tom Clements, the Colorado prisons chief, was killed on Tuesday, March 19th of last year. So he was killed exactly a year ago today. And for 2 days after his killing, it was absolutely baffling and frightening. I mean, it was possible, of course, that this was just a random killing. Maybe it was a personal matter of some kind, but his job as the head of the prisons in the state, and the fact that he was killed on his doorstep by someone who did nothing on the scene other than kill him, it frankly made it feel like an assassination. And assassinations of public officials in this country are rare. Yes, we have had our share, including some very high-profile ones, but I think I said at the time when we were covering this murder when it first happened that being a public servant in the United States takes the kind of bravery that we usually associate with having the courage of your convictions. We don't usually expect that being a public official in this country is something that requires actual physical bravery. But this appeared to be an assassination. Tom Clements was killed March 19th, a year ago today. 2 days after he was killed, that boxy-shaped, dark two-door sedan that had been seen idling on Tom Clements' street the night of the shooting, that same car turned up 2 states over and 500 miles away in Texas. And this footage we're going to show you is not bloody, but you may find it to be upsetting. The car was a black Cadillac DeVille. At around 11 a.m. Central Time in Texas, a county sheriff's deputy tried to pull that car over for a traffic stop. The driver of the car pulled over, and then he opened fire on the deputy. He shot the deputy in the chest and in the shoulder and in the forehead. Deputy James Boyd survived miraculously, although he was seriously injured. He now has a titanium plate in his head. He told the Denver Post this week that even though he was reinstated as a deputy a year later, he is not sure he's going to be able to continue in this line of work. It is a miracle he survived. After that driver shot Deputy Boyd, he sped off. He led police through Texas on a chase that weaved in and out of traffic at more than 100 miles an hour. Ultimately, the driver of that Cadillac DeVille crashed that car into an 18-wheeler. Even after crashing the car, the driver got himself out of the vehicle and went down, still shooting at police. Police returned fire. They shot the driver. He died of his injuries later in a nearby hospital. The shooter's name was Evan Ebel. He had been released 3 months earlier from the Colorado State prison system. He'd been released direct from solitary confinement onto the street. He had cut off his ankle monitoring bracelet a week before, but his parole officer apparently either didn't notice or didn't get around to issuing an arrest warrant for him cutting off the bracelet until the day before Evan Ebel was killed in that shootout in Texas. And that was the day after Evan Ebel had killed the chief of the Colorado Department of Corrections while standing at his front door. When they searched Evan Ebel's car in Texas, they found weapons, they found ammunition, they found what ballistics tests later showed to be the gun that was used to kill Tom Clements. And that gun that was used to kill Tom Clements was the same gun that was used to kill that young father 2 days before, Nathan Leon. 2 days before Tom Clements, in that case that otherwise made absolutely no sense, it was the same gun, it was the same guy. They also found in Evan Ebel's car a Domino's pizza delivery uniform, presumably the one that belonged to Mr. Leon, which was not found with his body. And so there is the connection between those two crimes, right? It is presumed that the man who worked for Domino's was killed, at least in part, amazingly, to get that uniform. And then that uniform may have been used as part of a ruse to get Tom Clements to open the door of his home in Monument when the doorbell rang, to open the door of his home to someone he did not recognize. That all happened exactly a year ago today, and it was baffling and it was upsetting. Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper made the emotional announcement that his cabinet member, Tom Clements, had been killed. Hundreds of people turned out for his memorial service. The family of Nathan Leon pleaded with the public for anybody to help provide any information. For Tom Clements, the Department of Corrections honored him. And of course, it was basically clear in the immediate aftermath of that shootout in Texas that authorities knew who had pulled the trigger on both Tom Clements and Nathan Leon, right? They knew that it was this man, Evan Ebel, who died in that shootout. But very clearly, that was not the end of it, because Evan Ebel was also known to be a member of a prison gang, a white supremacist Colorado prison gang called the 211 Crew. Did he kill the head of the corrections department and Nathan Leon on his own, or did he do it on orders from someone? In August, the Denver Post reported that a source with direct access to sealed court documents in the case and with direct knowledge of the investigation had told the paper that after Evan Ebel was paroled, after he was let out last January, his cell phone records showed that he was in frequent contact with members of the gang, members of the 211 Crew. Quote, authorities believe gang members gave him money to buy a car, got him his license plates for that car, and helped him arrange the theft and murder in which Evan Ebel shot Nathan Leon and stole the Domino's uniform. Quote, after killing Tom Clements on March 19th, Ebel drove to Colorado Springs and stayed at a safe house arranged by gang members, the source said investigators believe. And when Evan Ebel was heading for Texas 2 days later, quote, investigators have concluded that he was driving to the home of a paroled 211 Crew member who lived south of Dallas. The Denver Post also reports that Evan Ebel made 23 calls in 24 hours to other members of the gang, including the hours immediately before and immediately after he shot and killed Tom Clements. So the authorities have been incredibly tight-lipped about what happened here. Tom Clements' widow released a statement today saying that investigators have given her no information about her husband's killing that she did not know already in the first 48 hours after his death, and it has been a year. But if the Denver Post's reporting is correct, then there's not much question that this assassination wasn't just the work of one man, that gang members at least helped plan the initial theft of that Domino's uniform, that they provided the hiding place for him, that they provided the vehicle, that they provided constant advice and direction. They had given him a place outside Colorado to flee to, which is what he was trying to do when he basically accidentally got caught and then killed in Texas. Here's the thing, though. The Domino's uniform and the gun that killed Nathan Leon and Tom Clements, those were not the only things that were found in Evan Ebel's car when it crashed in Texas. The evidence recovery log of items that were transferred from Evan Ebel's car when it crashed that day included, quote, miscellaneous bomb-making materials, black powder, a document with apparent bomb-making instructions, also a roll of duct tape and zip ties. He had already killed 2 people at this point, the first one presumably as a means toward killing the second one. In which case, what was the bomb for? What was next? Who was he going after with the bomb? Who was he going to tie up with the zip ties? Well, what else was found there was a hit list, which on the occasion of the 1-year anniversary of these crimes now, the Denver Post's Kirk Mitchell is newly reporting details of. 1 year after this apparent assassination in Colorado, a government official now tells the Denver Post that more than 20 public officials were on a hit list that was found with Evan Ebel when he was killed in Texas. And one federal official who says he was named on that hit list said he never in his life had anything to do with Evan Ebel. Quote, my name was one of the names on the list. I didn't know Evan Ebel, and I had no contact with Evan Ebel. So it would make no sense for Evan Ebel to be going after that person, to be listing this public official on a hit list if he had no personal connection to him. So why did that official end up on this hit list? We don't know, of course. But the official who says he's on the hit list, who says he had nothing to do with Evan Ebel, he did tell the Denver Post that although he never crossed paths with Evan Ebel or his case in the Colorado Department of Corrections, he did have some involvement with Homicidal al-Turki, that Saudi grad student who was convicted in the state of Colorado and sentenced to hard time in the state of Colorado, who vigorously contests his innocence, who has sought repeatedly through the highest channels to try to get moved home to Saudi Arabia to serve out the rest of his sentence there. He is the prisoner who was told personally by Tom Clements the week before Tom Clements got murdered that his request to go home to Saudi Arabia was denied. One of the people who says he is on this hit list, who is a federal official, says he did have an involvement in that case. The Denver Post says that the FBI has been investigating any possible financial transactions between that prisoner, between Mr. Al-Turki and this gang, this 211 crew. Mr. Al-Turki has denied any involvement in Tom Clements' murder. His lawyer has called any speculation to the contrary outrageous. And, you know, rightly so. Mr. Al-Turki is only circumstantially linked to these murders. But that's all. It's only circumstantial, and it could very well be a coincidence of timing. But where did that hit list come from? And if there are more than 20 people, more than 20 public officials on that hit list, some of whom had no conceivable connection to the killer, then who put those names on the hit list for him? And if Evan Ebel assassinated a high-ranking public official in this country and then was interrupted in the midst of trying to kill more than 20 other public officials that were also on that list, and if he was doing so on orders from someone else, who is the someone else? Why is it that the only person prosecuted in this case thus far, a year later, is the young woman who was the apparent patsy in this case, who made the straw purchase for him to get his gun? No one is guilty until they are proven to be guilty. But in this case, it is approaching the level of inconceivable that no one is guilty except Evan Ebel. As of tonight, it has been 1 year. And the anger from Tom Clements' widow is both palpable and at this point very, very understandable.
I'm angry that it's a year later and we don't know any more about why than we did 12 months ago. It's incredibly frustrating. I think 48 hours after Tom was murdered, we heard that the individual who came to our home and committed that murder was caught and was dead. And now it's a year later, and that's still all the conclusive information that we have. I think we know the who, we know the individual, and so we know at least one aspect, but we do not know why. We don't know who participated with him. We don't know who financed him. We don't know who supported him in his planning. It is very difficult for me to believe that he planned and orchestrated and financed this act himself. I heard that he had a list of individuals and that Tom was on that list. And I am so grateful that he wasn't able to carry out, you know, any of the rest of the names on the list.
Were, in fact, there more than 20 public officials on that hit list? Who wrote that hit list? Who was working with Evan Ebel? Why has there been no further information from the authorities? Why has there been no legal action in this case? Why did these murders happen? Were more people in danger? Are more people in danger? This story unfolded very quickly a year ago between the two murders and the roadside shootout in Texas. But since then, the widow of Colorado Prisons Chief Tom Clements, as you just saw, says she has learned basically nothing new, nothing from investigators. Why is that, and how does that make sense 1 year later? More on that just ahead. Stay with us.